The warning came on every frequency at once. It pierced through subspace channels, quantum relays, and ancient radio bands that hadn't been used in millennia. Every ship, every station, every communications hub in the Galactic Council's territory received the same message simultaneously. The transmission was impossibly powerful, originating from somewhere beyond the mapped edge of space. At first, the message seemed like static. Then the pattern emerged. It was a language long dead, spoken by a species that had vanished 40,000 years ago when their homeworld turned to ash and dust. The translation came quickly. The linguistic archive still held records of humanity's tongue, preserved like fossils in amber. When the computers finally decoded the signal, the message was terrifyingly simple. Run. Just one word. Nothing more. Nothing less. Ambassador Velshara of the Krithian Empire stood in the great chamber of the Zenith Station, her 4 arms crossed in a gesture of dismissal. Around her, representatives from 200 species murmured in concern. The chamber floated in the center of the galaxy's capital nexus, a massive construct of metal and light where the Council had governed for 3,000 years. "This is clearly a hoax," Velshara announced, her voice echoing through the chamber. "The humans are extinct. Everyone knows this. Their star went supernova 40,000 years ago. Nothing survived." Dr. Ixon, a small being covered in soft blue fur, raised one paw hesitantly. She was a xenoarchaeologist, one of the few who had dedicated her life to studying the extinct species that came before. "With respect, Ambassador, we never found any human bodies. No escape pods. No refugee ships. They simply vanished before the star exploded." "Because they died," Velshara snapped. "Primitives who never even achieved faster-than-light travel. They had nowhere to run." Commander Thross of the Ordained Fleet stepped forward. He was a massive being, crystalline and angular, his body reflecting the chamber's lights in rainbow patterns. "The signal's power output is unprecedented. Whatever sent this message has technology far beyond our capabilities. We should investigate." The Council descended into argument. Some species demanded immediate military action. Others wanted to ignore the message entirely. A few suggested prayer to their various gods. Through it all, the message continued to broadcast across every channel, that single word repeating endlessly. Run. 3 days later, the Council reached a compromise. They would send a small reconnaissance fleet to the transmission's origin point. 3 ships, fast and well-armed, crewed by volunteers. Their mission was simple: find the source, assess the threat, and return with answers. Dr. Ixon stood in the docking bay of the Vigilant Truth, the expedition's flagship. She had never expected to be chosen for this mission, but her expertise on humanity made her invaluable. Around her, the crew prepared for departure. Captain Zorath, a veteran of the Rim Wars, oversaw the operation with calm efficiency. "We leave in 1 hour," Zorath announced. His species resembled great cats covered in silver fur and moving with predatory grace. "Final checks on all systems. No mistakes." The other 2 ships, Seeker's Promise and Dawn's Mandate, flanked them in the launch formation. Together, they would journey to the Kepler Abyss, a region of space so empty and dark that few had ever bothered to map it. The transmission had come from somewhere in that void. As the ships engaged their faster-than-light drives, Dr. Ixon settled into her small quarters. She pulled up her research files on humanity, documents she had studied for decades. The humans had been fascinating. Aggressive, curious, and remarkably adaptable, they had clawed their way from simple stone tools to nuclear fusion in just 10,000 years. But they had never escaped their solar system. When astronomers detected the instability in their star, humanity had only primitive chemical rockets. The entire species should have died when Earth burned. Yet no bodies were ever found, no ruins, just silence. The journey to the Kepler Abyss took 2 weeks. As they traveled, Dr. Ixon gave lectures to the crew about what they might find. She showed them images of humans, bipedal beings with flat faces and strange forward-facing eyes. She played recordings of their music, their languages, their art. Some crew members found it beautiful. Others found it unsettling. They were warriors, Dr. Ixon explained during one briefing. Their entire history was war. They fought each other, their environment, everything. But they also created beauty. They wrote poetry. They dreamed of stars. "Sounds dangerous," muttered Krell, the weapons officer. "Maybe it's good they're gone." Dr. Ixon didn't respond. She had spent too long studying humanity to dismiss them so easily. They had been dangerous, yes, but also magnificent. When they finally reached the coordinates, space was empty. Sensors showed nothing but void. No stars, no planets, no structures. Just darkness stretching endlessly in all directions. "This makes no sense," Captain Zorath growled, studying the displays. "The transmission definitely came from here. Our readings are precise. Could it be cloaked?" asked Krell. "Nothing can hide from our sensors," Zorath replied. But his tail twitched with uncertainty. For 3 hours they searched. The 3 ships spread out in a search pattern, scanning every frequency, every wavelength. Nothing. Then suddenly reality twisted. Space itself seemed to ripple. Gravity readings spiked wildly. And then something appeared where nothing had existed moments before. A structure, massive, ancient, impossible. It was a station, but unlike any design the Council had ever created. Clean lines and elegant curves combined with brutal functionality. The hull was pristine, maintained perfectly despite the eons. And on its side, clearly visible, were symbols that made Dr. Ixon's breath catch. Human writing. "It's real," she whispered. "By all the stars, it's real." Captain Zorath ordered the Vigilant Truth to dock with the station. His crew armed themselves, unsure what they might find inside. The station's airlock opened automatically as they approached, as if it had been waiting for them. A boarding party of 12 crossed into the structure. Emergency lights flickered on, illuminating corridors that had been dark for millennia. The air was breathable, kept fresh by systems that still functioned after 40,000 years. They found the main control room at the station's heart. Holographic displays activated as they entered, responding to their presence. The interface was clearly designed for human hands, but it adapted quickly to their touch. "It's an archive," Dr. Ixon realized, accessing the database. "A repository of knowledge. They left it here deliberately. The files were extensive. History, science, art, everything humanity had known. But buried deep in the system was a series of locked files marked with a single word in human language. Exodus." Captain Zorath looked at Dr. Ixon. "Can you open it?" Her paws trembled as she worked. The encryption was sophisticated, but designed to be broken eventually. The humans had wanted someone to find this. After several minutes, the files opened. Video footage began to play. It showed Earth in its final days. Humans scrambling to build something massive in orbit. Not warships, not weapons. Something else entirely, they knew, Dr. Ixon whispered. They detected the stellar instability decades before it happened. This footage is from their final year. The video showed massive vessels unlike anything in the archives. Generation ships. Thousands of them, each carrying hundreds of thousands of humans in suspended animation. "They evacuated," Captain Zorath said in disbelief. "The entire species, but where did they go?" Krell asked. The video continued. It showed the fleet launching, heading not toward any known star but out into the void between galaxies. Away from everything. Into the dark. Then the final message played. A human woman, elderly and tired, stared into the camera. When she spoke, the translation scrolled beneath her words. "If you find this, it means we survived long enough to send the warning. We went into the dark because we had no choice. What we found there changed us. What we fought there hardened us. We held it back for 40,000 years, but now it's broken through." The woman's eyes held infinite sadness. "We can't stop it alone. We can barely slow it down. So we sent you the only message that matters. Run. Run far and fast. Because what's coming has ended civilizations before and we barely survived it." The recording ended. The control room fell silent. Then new alarms began to sound throughout the station. The alarms shrieked through the ancient human station. Captain Zorath's team grabbed their weapons instinctively, spinning to face every shadow. The holographic displays around them flickered and changed, showing a new message in bold human script. Incoming transmission. Origin, unknown. Dr. Ixon's paws moved across the controls, her academic curiosity overriding her fear. "Something's trying to contact us. The station's receiving a signal." "From where?" Zorath demanded. "I don't know. It's coming from everywhere and nowhere, the same way the original warning reached us." Before anyone could respond, the air in the center of the control room began to shimmer. Light bent and twisted, forming patterns that hurt to look at directly. Reality seemed to fold in on itself, and then something stepped through. A human. The boarding party raised their weapons, but Zorath held up a hand to stop them from firing. The figure before them was clearly human, matching the descriptions in every archive. Bipedal, relatively small, with that distinctive flat face and forward-facing eyes. But something was wrong. Something had changed. The human woman wore armor that seemed to be made from solidified darkness. It absorbed light rather than reflecting, it making her edges unclear and difficult to focus on. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, showing networks of something that glowed faintly beneath. Her eyes were completely black, no white visible at all, and they seemed to contain depths that shouldn't exist in normal space. When she spoke, her voice came from everywhere at once, echoing in ways that defied the room's acoustics. "I am Commander Kira Voss of the Remnant Fleet. You received our warning." Zorath stepped forward, trying to maintain his composure despite every instinct screaming at him to run. "We did. We came seeking answers. What happened to humanity?" Kira's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in those black eyes. Memory. Pain. "We survived. That's what happened. We fled into the void beyond the galactic rim, where no light reaches and space itself becomes strange. We thought we would be safe there." "But you weren't," Dr. Ixon said softly. "No." Kira walked to one of the displays, her movements fluid and unsettling, like she wasn't quite subject to normal gravity. "We found something in the dark, or rather, it found us." She touched the controls and the holographic displays changed. Images appeared, but they were wrong somehow. The crew's eyes ached trying to process what they saw. Shapes that bent in impossible directions. Darkness that moved with purpose. Emptiness that was somehow alive. "We call it the silence," Kira continued. "Your translation won't capture what it truly is. But that's close enough. It exists in the spaces between galaxies, in the great voids where nothing should live. It feeds on light, on energy, on thought itself." Captain Zorath felt his fur stand on end. "How do you fight something like that? You don't fight it. You run from it. Or you become something that can hurt it." Kira turned to face them, and in the station's lights, they could see scars on her face that seemed to cut through dimensions. Wounds that had healed but left marks on reality itself. "We chose to fight. We had nowhere left to run." Dr. Ixon accessed her datapad with trembling paws. "How long have you been fighting?" 40,000 years by your calendar. Time moves differently in the deep void. For us, it's been much longer." Kira's voice carried the weight of ages. "We lost so many. Entire generation ships consumed. Billions dead before we learned how to resist." "How?" Krell asked, his weapon still raised. "How do you fight something that eats light and thought?" Kira smiled, and it was not a comforting expression. "We changed. We adapted. We evolved beyond what we were. Humans were always good at that, at becoming whatever we needed to survive. In the void, we needed to become like the void itself." She held up her hand, and the flesh became transparent. They could see through her, see the bones that weren't quite bone anymore, see energy flowing in patterns that made no scientific sense. "We merged with our technology. We altered our biology. We touched things no species should touch and learned to use them as weapons. We became part of the darkness so we could fight the silence on equal terms." The crew of the Vigilant Truth stood in horrified silence. This was humanity. This was what the curious, violent, dreaming species had become. "The silence doesn't think like you do," Kira continued, letting her hand return to normal. "It's not evil. It's not malicious. It simply is. Like a storm or a flood. It flows through the voids between galaxies, consuming everything it touches, growing larger and more powerful with each civilization it devours." "How many?" Dr. Ixon asked. "How many civilizations has it destroyed?" "We found evidence of 3 before yours. The first was so ancient that only fragments remain. The second left behind structures that still float in the void, empty monuments to species whose names are lost. The third was relatively recent, only 5 million years ago. They were advanced, powerful. The silence consumed them in less than a century." Captain Zorath forced himself to think tactically. "You said you've been fighting it for 40,000 years. That means you've been holding it back? Barely. Kira's black eyes seemed to look through him, seeing something far away. We built a containment line at the Galactic Rim. Stations like this one, but larger. Weapons that can hurt the silence, powered by principles we learned in the deep dark. For 40 millennia, we've held that line with everything we have. And now? Zorath already knew the answer, but he had to hear it. 2 cycles ago, the silence breached our containment. It's flowing into the galaxy faster than we can respond. Our projections show it will reach your council space in approximately 6 standard months. The control room fell silent, except for the soft hum of ancient machinery. 6 months. Half a year to prepare for something that had destroyed multiple galactic civilizations. Why warn us? Krell demanded. Why not just let us die? You survived 40,000 years on your own. You clearly don't need us. Kira turned to face him fully, and for a moment, something human flickered in those alien eyes. Because we remember what it's like to be helpless. We remember Earth burning while we fled into the night. We remember the first time we encountered the silence and didn't know what it was or how to fight it. We remember losing everything. She moved closer to the group, and they could feel the temperature drop around her, as if she carried the cold of the void with her. We could have let you all die. It would be easier tactically. Let the silence consume your civilization while we regroup and rebuild our containment line. But we didn't become monsters. We became what we needed to become to survive. But we didn't lose ourselves entirely. Dr. Ixon felt tears forming in her eyes. You're trying to save us. We're trying to give you a choice, Kira corrected. The same choice we never had. You can evacuate. Gather your people and flee deep into the galaxy, away from the rim. The AudioBook silence moves slowly, and you might have decades or centuries before it reaches you again. Time to prepare, to adapt, to become something that can resist. Or, Captain Zorath asked, or you can stand and fight alongside us. We'll share our technology, our knowledge, everything we've learned. But I'll be honest with you, the cost will be high. Your people will have to change. Not as drastically as we did, but you can't fight the silence as you are now. You'll need to adapt, to accept modifications that your cultures might find disturbing. Kira accessed the station's controls, and new images appeared. Humans in combat, fighting against the writhing darkness of the silence. Ships that seemed to be alive, weapons that tore holes in space itself, soldiers who moved like ghosts through reality. This is what we became. This is the price of survival. Some of your species might accept it. Others will refuse. That's why we're giving you the choice. Captain Zorath looked at his crew. He saw fear in their eyes, but also determination. They were all volunteers, after all. They had chosen to come, here seeking answers, knowing they might not like what they found. How much time do we have to decide? He asked. None. Kira's response was blunt. The silence doesn't wait for committee decisions and political debates. Every day you spend arguing is a day it gets closer. You need to choose now, evacuate or fight. Run or stand. What about a third option? Dr. Ixon said quietly. What if we can't fight but we refuse to run? What if we just want to live our lives until the end? Kira's expression softened slightly. Then you'll die. The silence doesn't negotiate. It doesn't take prisoners. It simply consumes everything it touches, and then there's nothing left but void. Not even memories. She walked to the viewport, looking out at the darkness beyond. We've held it back for 40,000 years, but we're tired. We're few. We need allies. Or the next containment breach will be the last. So we sent the warning. Now you have to choose. Captain Zorath made his decision. I believe you. I don't understand everything you've said, and I'm terrified of what you've become. But you could have let us die, and you didn't. That means something. He tapped his communication device. All ships, this is Captain Zorath. Prepare to return to Council space. We're bringing back a guest and information that will change everything. Kira nodded slowly. Some of you will come with me instead. I'll take volunteers to see our fleet to witness what humanity has become. They can report back separately, confirm everything I've told you. The Council will need independent verification. Dr. Ixon materialized in absolute darkness. For a terrifying moment, she thought she had died. The teleportation had felt wrong, like being pulled through spaces that shouldn't exist. Her body tingled with the memory of places between places, and her mind struggled to process what her senses had experienced. Then lights flickered on, dim and scattered, revealing a chamber so vast she couldn't see the far walls. The space felt old in a way that made the human archive station seem young. This wasn't just ancient. This was something that had existed for longer than it should have been possible to exist. "Welcome to the Eternal Vigil," Commander Kira Voss said beside her. "Flagship of the Remnant Fleet." The 3 other volunteers from the Vigilant Truth stood nearby, looking equally disoriented. Krell clutched his weapon, though his hands trembled. Navigator Shen, a being made of crystallized thought, pulsed with confused colors. Engineer Morak's tentacles curled protectively around his body core. "This is a ship?" Krell asked, his voice cracking slightly. "Ship, station, weapon, home. It's all of those things." Kira began walking, and they followed automatically, drawn by some instinct they couldn't name. "We built the Remnant Fleet over 30,000 years. Each vessel contains the population of what used to be an entire generation ship. Billions of humans living and working and fighting in structures the size of small moons. The corridor they walked through was wrong in subtle ways. The walls curved at angles that shouldn't exist in 3-dimensional space. Lights floated without apparent power sources. The air tasted like starlight and felt like memory. They passed other humans. Each one made Dr. Ixon's academic heart race with fascination and terror. Some had skin that shifted like liquid darkness. Others seemed partially transparent, their organs visible and glowing with strange energies. A few didn't walk so much as drift, only occasionally touching the ground as if gravity was a suggestion rather than a law. But they all had those same black eyes, every single one. The mark of what humanity had become. "What did you do to yourselves?" Shen asked, his crystalline body resonating with the question. "Everything necessary." Kira led them to a massive viewport.
Look, the view beyond stole their breath.
Space stretched out before them, but it was wrong. The stars were dimmer than they should be, their light struggling to penetrate something invisible but present, and between the stars, darkness moved with purpose. "That's the silence," Kira said quietly. "You're seeing it with enhanced optics. To normal vision, it's invisible until it's too late. It flows through space like water, consuming everything it touches." Dr. Ixon watched in horror as a small asteroid drifted into one of the dark patches. It didn't explode or disintegrate. It simply stopped existing. One moment it was there, solid and real. The next moment there was nothing. Not even debris. "How do you fight that?" Morak whispered. "You become like it." Kira touched the viewport and her hand passed partially through the solid material. "We learn to exist in multiple states simultaneously, solid and not solid, present and absent, real and unreal. The silence can't consume what it can't fully grasp." She pulled her hand back and it solidified again. "Every human in the Remnant Fleet has been modified. Some volunteered. Some were born this way. Children of the void who never knew Earth or normal space. We're not entirely human anymore. Not in the way your records describe. But we remember being human. That's what matters." The viewport changed, showing different sections of the fleet. Dr. Ixon counted hundreds of massive vessels, each one unique, each one impossible. Ships made of crystallized shadow, stations that folded space around themselves, weapons platforms that seemed to exist in multiple locations simultaneously. "This is your entire civilization?" Shen asked. "What's left of it?" Kira's voice carried deep sadness. "We numbered in the trillions when we fled Earth. Now we're down to approximately 200 billion. The silence consumed the rest over the millennia. Every ship you see represents hundreds of billions who died defending it." She led them deeper into the vessel, through corridors that twisted in ways that made their heads hurt. They passed training halls where humans practiced combat techniques that defied physics. They saw nurseries where children played with toys that shifted through dimensions. They entered medical facilities where doctors performed surgeries on patients who were only partially present in normal reality. "This is our life now," Kira explained. "We're born in the void, we fight in the void, and we die in the void. Most of us have never seen a normal star up close, never walked on a planet, never experienced what you would call ordinary existence." Dr. Ixon felt tears forming in her eyes. "I'm so sorry. Your species gave up everything. We gave up nothing, Kira's voice was sharp. We chose survival. We chose to keep existing, even if it meant changing what existence meant for us. That's what humans do. We adapt, we overcome. We refuse to die quietly. They entered a command center where dozens of humans worked at stations that seemed to respond to thought rather than touch. Holographic displays showed the entire galactic rim, with red markers indicating silence incursions and blue markers showing human defensive positions. An older man approached them. His hair was white, but his black eyes were alert and sharp. Unlike the others, he wore simple clothes rather than armor, but he radiated authority that made even Krell lower his weapon respectfully. "This is Admiral Chen," Kira introduced him, "overall commander of the Remnant Fleet. He's been fighting the Silence for over 600 years. 600? Morak's tentacles quivered. How? "We age slowly in the void," Admiral Chen said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Time itself becomes flexible when you exist partially outside normal space. I was born in the Exodus Fleet, one of the last children to remember Earth from stories rather than experience. Now I command forces my ancestors couldn't have imagined." He gestured to the displays. "The red zones are silence incursions. As you can see, we're losing ground. 2 cycles ago, we lost the Kepler defense line. 3 months ago, the outer rim fortifications fell. Now the silence flows into the galaxy proper, and we're fighting a delaying action. How long can you hold?" Shen asked. "Alone? 6 months, maybe less." Chen's expression was grim. "With allies? With your council's forces and resources? We might push it back, rebuild the containment line, buy another few millennia. Or, Dr. Ixon already knew there was an or everyone dies. The silence will consume the entire galaxy, then move on to the next one. It's happened before. It will happen again unless we stop it here." Krell stepped forward.
Why didn't you contact us sooner?
"Why wait 40,000 years?" Admiral Chen and Commander Voss exchanged glances. Finally, Chen spoke. "Because we weren't ready. When we first encountered the silence, we were still mostly human. We tried to fight it with the technology we'd brought from Earth. We lost entire fleets in hours, billions dead before we understood what we were facing." He walked to the viewport, looking out at the darkness beyond. "We had to change. Had to evolve. Had to become something that could hurt the silence. That took time, thousands of years of experimentation, adaptation, failure, and loss. We didn't contact your civilization because we were too busy trying to survive our own extinction. By the time we'd developed weapons that could fight the silence effectively," Kira continued, "we'd been in the void for 30,000 years. We'd become what you see now. We knew that if we contacted the Council, they'd see us as threats, as monsters. Maybe they'd be right. So we stayed in the dark," Chen said. "We held the line in silence, protecting a civilization that didn't even know we existed. We told ourselves it was enough to keep them safe, even if they never knew our names. Dr. Ixon felt her heart breaking. You protected us for millennia and we didn't even know. That was the point." Kira's expression softened. "We remembered what it was like to be normal, to walk under a yellow sun, to breathe air that wasn't recycled 1,000,000 times, to not fear that every shadow might consume you. We wanted to preserve that for someone, even if we could never have it again." "What changed?" Morak asked. "Why send the warning now?" Admiral Chen touched the displays and they zoomed in on the breached defense line. "We're failing. The silence is adapting to our weapons, evolving faster than we can respond. Our population is declining. We're having fewer children because raising them in constant warfare is nearly impossible. In another century, maybe 2, we won't have the numbers to maintain the containment line even if we rebuild it." "You need us," Shen said, understanding dawning in his crystalline matrix. "Yes." Chen turned to face them directly. "We need your numbers, your fresh perspectives, your resources and manufacturing capability. Most of all, we need you to keep existing because if we fall and you're not prepared, the silence will consume everything we've fought to preserve." Kira accessed a data pad and handed it to Dr. Ixon. "This contains everything. Our history, our technology, our methods for fighting the silence. Also, the specifications for the modifications needed to resist its effects. Your people need to see this, all of it. Then they need to choose." Dr. Ixon took the data pad with trembling paws. It was heavy, not with physical weight, but with the burden of knowledge. The complete record of humanity's 40,000-year war, everything they'd learned, everything they'd sacrificed. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so crowded. Every species, every faction, every political bloc had sent representatives. The gallery overflowed with observers. Camera drones hovered everywhere, broadcasting the proceedings across 200 worlds. Ambassador Velshara stood at her podium, her forearms spread wide in a gesture of authority. This is insanity. You're asking us to trust creatures that aren't even fully real anymore, to modify our bodies based on the word of monsters who claim to be protecting us. Captain Zorath stood at the witness platform, his silver fur showing streaks of premature gray from stress. I saw their fleet. I witnessed what they've become. Yes, they've changed, but they've been fighting for our survival for 40,000 years without asking for anything in return. Until now, Velshara snapped. Now they want us to become like them, to give up what we are. Dr. Ixon stepped forward, her small frame dwarfed by the massive chamber, but her voice carried clearly through the amplification systems. They're not asking us to become like them. They're offering us the tools to survive. There's a difference. She activated the holographic display, showing the data humanity had provided. The images of the silence made several council members recoil. It was one thing to hear about it. Seeing it was something else entirely. This is what's coming, Dr. Ixon said, her voice steady despite her fear. An entity that exists in the voids between galaxies. It doesn't think like us. It doesn't negotiate. It simply consumes everything it touches, and then there's nothing left. Not even atoms. Just emptiness. The chamber fell silent as the recordings played. Asteroids vanishing. Small outpost stations being erased from existence. Even light itself being swallowed by the advancing darkness. Humanity fought this alone for 40,000 years. Dr. Ixon continued. They paid a price we can barely comprehend. They gave up their home, their bodies, their very nature. And they did it so this thing wouldn't reach us. Commander Thross of the Ordained Fleet accessed his data terminal. Our strategic analysis confirms the human timeline. If the silence maintains its current rate of advance, it will reach our outer colonies in 4 to 5 months. Our core worlds in 7 to 8 months. Then we evacuate, suggested Representative Quilks of the Merchant Guilds. We have time to move the population inward away from the rim. And go where? Captain Zorath challenged. The silence consumed an entire galaxy before this one. It consumed 3 civilizations we know of. Running just delays the inevitable. Ambassador Velshara's scales flushed with agitation. So we're supposed to trust our entire civilization to humans? The same species that spent their entire pre-space history at war? What if this is all an elaborate conquest plan? Then it's the longest, most expensive conquest plan in history. Admiral Thross pulled up more data. The human fleet numbers approximately 800 vessels. Large vessels, yes, but still only 800. We have over 50,000 military ships across the Council. If humanity wanted to conquer us, they could have done it millennia ago when we were less advanced. Unless they weren't strong enough then. Velshara argued. What if they've been waiting, growing stronger, and now they're ready to strike? Dr. Ixon felt her patience snap. They teleported 4 of us onto their flagship. They showed us their technology, their weapons, their entire strategic position. If they wanted to harm us, we would already be dead. They didn't even confiscate our weapons. She accessed her own datapad, pulling up the files humanity had provided. I've spent 3 days reviewing this information. It's comprehensive. It's honest. It shows their failures as well as their successes. They lost over 1 trillion humans in the first 1,000 years of the war because they didn't know what they were fighting. They're not hiding that. They're warning us not to make the same mistakes. The Council descended into argument. Some species advocated for immediate military mobilization. Others wanted to flee to the far side of the galaxy. A few suggested prayer and surrender to fate. Through it all, the clock continued counting down. In a small observation room overlooking the main chamber, Commander Kira Voss watched the proceedings. She stood in shadows, her form barely visible even to enhanced security cameras. Beside her, Admiral Chen maintained a similar low profile. They're terrified, Chen observed quietly. They should be. Will they choose to fight? Kira asked. Some will, others won't. That's the nature of large civilizations. Not everyone agrees. Chen touched the window and his hand passed partially through it before he caught himself and solidified. The question is whether enough of them choose to fight to make a difference. And if they don't? Then we hold the line as long as we can and the galaxy burns. Chen's voice was matter-of-fact, lacking emotion. 600 years of war had burned away his capacity for despair. We've done it before. We'll do it again. Kira watched Dr. Ixon passionately defending humanity to the council. The small xenoarchaeologist had become their unlikely champion, arguing for trust in creatures she'd only known for days. It touched something in Kira's transformed heart, reminded her of humans who had once argued for hope when all seemed lost. She believes in us, Kira said softly. She believes in survival. We just happen to be offering the best chance at it. Chen turned from the window. Come on. We have work to do whether they choose to help or not. The council's debate continued for 3 more days. During that time, the silence advanced another light year into the galaxy. A small research station at the rim sent a distress signal, then went silent. When ships arrived to investigate, they found nothing. No debris, no bodies, just empty space where a station had existed. The recording of the station's final moments was played before the council. Scientists shouting in confusion as their instruments detected something impossible. Alarms sounding, then screaming, then silence, then nothing. The vote was called on the 4th day. The resolution was simple. Would the Galactic Council accept humanity's offer of alliance and access to their anti-silence technology? Velshara stood one final time before the vote. If we accept this, we change forever. Our people will have to undergo modifications we don't fully understand. We'll be trusting our survival to a species that isn't even fully human anymore. This is a path we cannot undo. Dr. Ixon rose to respond. You're right. We can't undo this. But we also can't undo the silence. It's here. It's real. And it's coming whether we're ready or not. Humanity is offering us a chance to be ready. The vote was taken. Of the 200 council species, 143 voted to accept the alliance. 37 voted to refuse and evacuate their populations to the far side of the galaxy. 20 abstained, choosing to wait and see. It wasn't the unanimous support humanity had hoped for, but it was enough. Admiral Chen materialized in the council chamber once the vote was concluded. His sudden appearance caused several representatives to reach for weapons before they remembered who he was. Thank you, Chen said simply. We know this wasn't an easy choice. We'll do everything we can to honor your trust. What happens now? Commander Thross asked. Now we begin the hard part. Chen activated a holographic display showing the galactic rim. We need to establish a new defensive line here, approximately 3 light-years interior to our current failing position. Every species that voted for alliance will need to contribute ships and resources. And the modifications? Quilks asked nervously. Optional, but recommended. Kira appeared beside Chen, making several representatives jump. We have 3 levels of modification. Basic, which provides resistance to the silence's effects without major physical changes. Intermediate, which enhances that resistance but requires more significant alterations. And advanced, which is what you see in us. Full integration with void-compatible technology. How many of our people will need to be modified? Velshara asked, her earlier hostility replaced by grim acceptance. Ideally, anyone who will be near the front lines, Chen replied. Ground troops, ship crews, station personnel. Basic modifications will protect them from the silence's direct effects, prevent it from consuming them instantly. Without modifications, exposure to the silence is immediately fatal. Dr. Ixon accessed the technical specifications humanity had provided. The basic modification process takes approximately 3 days. Recovery is another 2 days. It's reversible, though removal is not recommended once someone has been exposed to the silence. We'll need to set up modification centers on major worlds, Kira added. We have the technology and expertise to train your medical personnel in the procedures. Within 2 months, we can have facilities operational across council space. 2 months? Thross looked at the timeline. We have less than 4 months before the silence reaches our colonies, which is why we start immediately. Chen's holographic display shifted, showing a massive logistical operation. The Eternal Vigil and 12 other remnant fleet vessels will serve as mobile modification centers. We can process approximately 1 million individuals per day across all facilities. The scale of the operation was staggering. The Council would need to mobilize billions of troops, construct new defensive stations, deploy anti-silence weapons they barely understood, and convince their populations to accept modifications that would change them forever, all in less than 4 months. The defensive line stretched across 40 light-years of space. Stations positioned every few thousand kilometers. Weapons platforms floating in the darkness. Ships arranged in formations that humanity had learned through millennia of bitter experience. Dr. Ixon stood on the command deck of Defense Station Theta 7, watching the preparations through the massive viewports. She had undergone the basic modifications 3 weeks ago. The process had been less traumatic than she feared, though looking at her reflection still felt strange. Her eyes now carried a faint shimmer of darkness at their edges. Her fur had taken on a slightly translucent quality in certain lights, but she was alive, and she could survive near the silence without being instantly consumed. That was what mattered. Beside her, Captain Zorath commanded the station's defense operations. He too had been modified, his silver fur now threaded with lines of darkness that pulsed faintly with energy. He moved with new grace as if gravity had become optional for him. "How long until contact?" Dr. Ixon asked. 14 hours, Zorath replied. "The silence's forward edge is moving faster than projected. It's almost like it knows we're waiting for it." "It probably does." Commander Kira Voss materialized beside them, her arrival no longer causing startled reactions. The crew had grown used to humanity's unsettling abilities. The silence learns. Not the way we learn, but it adapts to resistance. It's encountered our defensive lines before. It knows we're here. Admiral Chen's voice came through the communication system. "All stations, this is Fleet Command. Commence final preparations. All personnel to battle stations. All weapon systems to stand by. Remember your training. Trust your modifications. And stay together." Across the defensive line, millions of soldiers from hundreds of species took their positions. Some were nervous. Some were confident. All were modified to some degree, their bodies altered to survive what was coming. The modifications had been the hardest part for most species to accept. Even the basic level changed things in subtle ways. Enhanced reaction speeds meant thinking felt slightly faster. Void resistance made normal space feel constraining, like wearing clothes that were too tight. The ability to partially exist outside normal reality caused moments of disorientation when looking at mirrors or reflections, but the alternative was death. Instant total erasure. So they accepted the changes and learned to live with them. "How many?" Dr. Ixon asked quietly. "How many didn't make it through the modifications?" Kira's expression darkened. 0.03% fatality rate across all species. Approximately 40,000 individuals out of the 2 billion who underwent the process. We lost more humans in single battles against the silence. It wasn't meant to be callous, just factual. Humanity had become very good at accepting casualties as statistical necessities. 40,000 years of war did that to a species. The hours passed slowly. Crew members checked weapon systems, ran simulations, said prayers to various gods. Some wrote final messages to families. Others sat in silence, contemplating what was coming. Dr. Ixon spent the time reviewing everything she'd learned about the silence. Even after weeks of study, it remained incomprehensible. It wasn't alive in any traditional sense. It wasn't dead either. It simply existed, flowing through space, consuming energy and matter and converting it into more of itself. Humanity's weapons worked by exploiting the silence's fundamental nature. They created pockets of artificial reality so dense and structured that the silence couldn't consume them easily. Energy weapons tuned to specific frequencies that disrupted the silence's cohesion. Physical projectiles made from void-forged materials that could hurt something that barely existed in normal space. The science was complex, but the principle was simple. You couldn't destroy the silence. You could only hurt it badly enough that it flowed around you instead of through you. "Contact in 5 minutes, Zorath announced. All stations report ready. Weapon systems charged. Shields at maximum." Kira moved to the tactical display. "Remember, the initial contact will be a probe. The silence will test our defenses, look for weaknesses. The real assault comes after it's evaluated our strength." "How long do we have?" Dr. Ixon asked. "Based on previous encounters, approximately 2 hours between probe and main assault. And if we survive the main assault, then we do it again, and again, and again, until either we hold or we fall back." Kira's black eyes reflected the tactical displays. War against the silence isn't like normal war. There are no truces, no negotiations, no pauses, just constant pressure until one side breaks. The viewport dimmed automatically as something approached. At first, it looked like space itself was darkening. Then they realized they were seeing the silence's forward edge. It moved like liquid shadow, flowing through space in defiance of physics. Where it passed, stars dimmed, background radiation vanished. Even the cosmic microwave background went silent, as if the universe itself was being erased. "Weapons free," Admiral Chen ordered. "All stations engage at will." The defensive line erupted with fire. Energy beams lanced out, striking the silence's forward edge. Where they hit, the darkness recoiled, torn apart by weapons designed specifically to hurt it. Physical projectiles followed, void-forged metal that could exist partially in the same state as the silence, able to damage it from within. The silence didn't roar or scream. It simply flowed around the attacks, probing for weaknesses. Tendrils of darkness reached out toward the nearest stations, testing their shields. "Station Theta 3 reports contact," Zorath said. "Shields holding. Minor fluctuations in power systems." Dr. Ixon watched as the silence touched their own station's shields. It felt like ice water running down her spine. Even though she was safe inside the station, her modifications let her sense what was happening in ways she couldn't quite explain. The silence was trying to understand them, to find a way through the defenses. "It's learning," she said. "Always," Kira confirmed. "Every second of contact teaches it more about our defenses. That's why we have to rotate our frequencies and tactics constantly. Stay unpredictable." The probe lasted 43 minutes before the silence withdrew, flowing back into deeper space. The defensive line had held, but the strain showed on everyone's faces. "Damage report," Zorath ordered. "Station Theta 3 has shield generators at 60% capacity. Station Omega 9 reports casualties. 5 crew members caught in a shield failure. Station Alpha 2 lost a weapon platform. 5 casualties. More names added to the endless list of those who had died fighting the silence. "We have 90 minutes before the main assault," Kira said. "Use the time to repair what you can and rest. You'll need your strength." The crew rotated through brief rest periods. Some ate, some slept. Some simply sat and stared at nothing, trying to process what they just experienced. Dr. Ixon found herself in the station's observation lounge, looking out at the darkness where the silence waited. She thought about Earth, about a planet she'd never seen burning 40,000 years ago, about humanity fleeing into the void and becoming something else entirely just to survive. "Does it get easier?" she asked as Kira appeared beside her. "No," Kira replied honestly. "You just get better at handling the fear. After 40,000 years, we've become very good at being afraid and fighting anyway. How do you do it? How do you keep going?" Kira was silent for a long moment. "Because the alternative is letting everything end. Every species that ever looked at the stars and wondered. Every civilization that built and dreamed and hoped. If we stop fighting, all of it vanishes into the silence. So we keep going. Not because we're brave, because we refuse to let it all be for nothing." The alert sirens sounded. The main assault was beginning. This time the silence came in force. Not a gentle probe, but a massive wave of darkness, flowing toward the defensive line like a tsunami. It was wider than their entire formation, deeper than they could measure, moving with purpose and power that defied comprehension. "All weapons. Maximum rate of fire," Admiral Chen ordered. "Give them everything." The defensive line blazed with light as every weapon fired simultaneously. Energy beams, kinetic projectiles, exotic weapons that warped space itself, all directed at the approaching darkness. The silence absorbed some attacks, flowed around others, recoiled from a few, but it kept coming, relentless and unstoppable. "Brace for impact," Zorath shouted. The silence hit their shields like a physical blow. The station shuddered. Power systems flickered. Alarms sounded across every deck. Dr. Ixon felt the silence pressing against the shields, trying to break through, trying to reach them and erase them from existence. "Shields at 70%, someone reported. 60%, 50. "Redirect auxiliary power," Zorath ordered. "Engineering, I need more power to the shield generators." Through the viewport, Dr. Ixon saw other stations under similar assault. One station's shields failed completely, and the silence flowed over it. The structure didn't explode. It simply stopped existing, erased as thoroughly as if it had never been built. "Station Beta 7 is gone," a voice reported, trying to stay calm. 2,000 crew lost. The battle raged for 3 hours. 3 hours of constant weapons fire, Constant shield adjustments, constant fear that the next moment would be their last. Several more stations fell. Dozens of ships were consumed, but the line held. Humanity's weapons made the difference.